This video is brought to you by Brazil Resources Incorporated, trading on the TSXV as BRI and on the OTC as BRIZF. Brazil Resources is exploring for gold in the emerging gold districts of Brazil. The company is 35% institutionally owned, with 16% of outstanding shares held by the KCR Fund, controlled by Doug Casey, Rick Rule, and Marin Katusa. The geological team has earlier discovered more than 10 million ounces of gold directly in Brazil and is led by successful mining CEO Amir Adnani. The company has $10 million in cash and no debt. For the thrill of gold discovery, visit BrazilResources.com or call 855-630-1001.
I've always understood Obamacare not so much as a health care bill, but as a revenue raiser. It has all kinds of hidden taxes and fees and charges and increases in Medicare deduction from your salary, and there's just a lot, and also purported savings. Whether you believe the savings or not is kind of beside the point. What matters for political purposes is how the OMB and how the Congressional Budget Office score it. Scoring is the process whereby the Congress or the executive branch estimate the fiscal impacts of certain policies. Well, right now they've got this thing scored to reduce the budget deficit over time. So if the Supreme Court knocks out Obamacare, that's going to blow a big hole in the budget and increase the deficit over and above what's already there, leaving aside the repeal of the Bush tax cuts and a number of other things that are in place. So the rating agencies might take a look at that, and when they start to think hard about the revenue impact or the fiscal impact of Obamacare being declared unconstitutional, that's a huge number that no one's confronting. I mean, I've spoken to senior congressional staffers, and I raised this point. I said, everyone talks about healthcare. I said, do you know the budget impact of Obamacare being declared unconstitutional? And the reaction to me is either no, they haven't thought about it, or if they have thought about it, they just say we don't want to talk about it. So this is not something anyone's really factored in. It's not priced into the market. People are not willing to kind of step up to it, but I would watch that space because it's going to blow a huge hole in the deficit, make it much bigger if the Supreme Court declares it unconstitutional.
When it comes to QE and the Federal Reserve, you had said you thought they might do it this year. Obviously, it might not be called QE. Do you still see some type of other intervention with the Federal Reserve and more money printing as far as a major announcement this year?
Yeah, I do, and I think it may come soon. We have a couple of meetings in April and April, May, June timeframe. I think that the Fed is not going to want to do this right in front of the election. I mean, September, October, November would look way too political. But I think if they wait until December, January of next year, it'll be too late. And so the window for action is fairly small. It's kind of April, May, June, July, maybe August at the latest, but I really think, kind of April, May, June, July. Now, the Fed doesn't like to do these things without signaling. They don't want to shock the market. So what I expect is that at the board meeting, or the Federal Open Market Committee meeting in April, which is coming up in about 10 days, they'll give us a strong signal. They might not actually start the program, but they'll say something or do something to indicate that it's coming, and then maybe in May or June actually announce the program. I do expect that, and I actually expect it more after this morning's announcement of Chinese GDP. Actually came out last night, our time, where it wasn't a collapse or a hard landing, but China's GDP came in below expectations and down significantly from the prior quarter. That means that the Chinese are probably going to have to resort to some kind of easing to keep their economy going, and then that's going to tend to strengthen the dollar, which is not what the Fed wants. The Fed wants a weaker dollar. And so this is what the currency wars are all about. This is what I talk about in my book, Currency Wars, where if China tries to ease to boost their economy, the Fed will fire back by easing here to cheapen the dollar even more. And so I think that the forces are aligned. There'll be an important speech by Chairman Bernanke on Monday. There was a speech a couple of days ago by Janet Yellen. She's a member of the Federal Open Market Committee, vice chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, and they are clearly signaling that they want more ease. And they lay out an economic rationale for it. I mean, people think the speeches are, boring or technical. They're really not. This is how the Fed tells us what they're going to do. And Janet Yellen made a very strong case. I happen to disagree with it, but so what? I mean, she made the case that there's a lot of slack in capacity utilization. There's a lot of slack in the labor market. The job situation is performing far worse than it should be at this stage of the economic cycle. It has improved a little bit lately, but the overall employment gap is extremely large, and so as a result of all this, she's really saying that we can print a lot more money and not worry about inflation. So she's just really laying the case, and I expect Bernanke to say something very similar. I mean, Bernanke and Yellen are kind of joined at the hip in terms of their views, and so there's no way that she's going to give a speech on one day and he's going to give a speech a couple of days later and contradict her. They're going to say the same thing, and so we kind of already know what Bernanke is going to say. And this is all pointing to easing. They don't want to get too many no votes on the Federal Open Market Committee. They don't want to have like a 5-4 vote or a 7-3 vote or anything like that. They want to have not more than 1 or 2 no votes. And so they're building consensus among their colleagues, putting forward the case. But yes, I do expect easing in the next few months.
Now, trying to gauge society in closing, I see the gold commercials on the news channels. There's a new show called Doomsday Preppers. How's the book Currency Wars doing in the U.S.?
The book's doing extremely well. It was, of course, a New York Times bestseller and a national bestseller. It's been out for almost 6 months, but the sales continue to be very strong. A lot of books come out and they make a big splash, and then they fade pretty quickly. But Currency Wars has maintained its ranking and is ranked number 1 in money and economics on Amazon, and it's in the top 1,000 books of all kinds. So that's fiction, nonfiction, children, art, every kind of book you can think of. So that's a very strong ranking. And it's getting a lot of reaction, and I'm interested not just in the quantity of sales, but in the quality of the readership. In other words, the people reading it tend to be very thoughtful. I get a lot of emails, a lot of inquiry on Twitter. I get a lot of invitations from policymakers in Washington to come down and talk about it. I've been invited down by the Treasury, some of the members of Congress, United States senators, and others. So it's very, very gratifying. The message is definitely resonating. I think people appreciate the fact that it deals with the issue at a high theoretical level, but it's not written in jargon. It's written in plain English. So often the people who are most expert have a tendency to write in ways that are incomprehensible to everyday Americans. And then on the other hand, there are a lot of ranters and bloggers who are saying the doom and gloom and the end is near, but they don't give you any analysis. They don't really say why. And so I tried to find a path in between where we give a lot of analysis and a lot of information that's hopefully useful to the reader, but we do it in plain English in ways that people can understand. So that has really found its audience. And we're actually being translated into 9 languages so far, and I think there'll be more. But the Korean edition just came out. We have foreign language editions coming in Japan, China, Vietnam, I mentioned Korea, Germany, Russia. There'll be a Portuguese edition, which will be really aimed at the Brazilian market, because Brazil, of course, is the first country to declare the currency wars and acknowledge their existence. So, and Poland, we have a Polish edition as well. So it's really becoming a bestseller around the world and attracting a lot of attention. So it is gratifying. But, that's why I wrote the book. I hoped it would find its audience. And it's policy-oriented, but it's also historical and educational. And I think the chapters on the Pentagon financial war game in 2009, a lot of people find intriguing because they had no idea that such, financial war games even existed.
Yeah, for people who love history, you'll love this book because it's history that you've never heard of. No one ever talks about this type of history, this monetary history. I actually personally bought a few books, and I've given them to my father and my father-in-law. And, it's a book that people understand, but it actually, with that first part, it really it's just captivating because of the credibility you have, of course, of being that guy for the financial war games for the Pentagon. It's great work, and I hope everybody buys one and reads it and shares it. Mr. Rickards, thanks so much for being on the show with us today and sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for inviting me.
You have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.